Good morning, and thank you for joining us. I'm Betsy Brennan, President and CEO of the Downtown San Diego Partnership. The Downtown Partnership is a nonprofit organization focused on advancing the economic prosperity and cultural vitality of downtown through membership, through membership, advocacy, public services, and community investment. On behalf of the Downtown Partnership and our sponsor, Bank of America, who you'll hear from in just a little bit, we want to welcome you to our Fed and Educated session. Our Fed and Educated program is designed to help businesses thrive by engaging industry experts to share their knowledge and offer turnkey solutions to some of today's most prevalent business challenges. As you know, today's discussion is going to focus on advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. The Downtown Partnership is currently undergoing a 2-year initiative that will focus on bringing more inclusive practices to our organization and to all of downtown. One of our first initiatives is our DEI program. With our DEI program was to better understand and measure participation of minority and women-owned businesses in our largest spending area, our Clean and Safe program. As a steward of public funding, it is vital that we provide opportunities for all of our residents and all of our businesses. I am pleased to say that the results of this study were just published, and it shows that 31% of our dollars go to minority and women-owned businesses. A baseline measure of the study shows that 9% would be a more typical result in this study. While we are excited by the results, we know we have a lot more to do, and this is only the beginning. We hope you leave this conversation with ways to implement strategies and best practices within your own company and team culture. As I have mentioned already, today's session was made possible by our member Bank of America. Bank of America extends back 240 years, and since that time, they've come together from many sources to become what they are today. A company united in their purpose to help make financial lives better through the power of every connection. They are also a dedicated company committed to making an impact and investment through the region. We appreciate and value their longtime involvement as an active member of downtown and of the Downtown San Diego Partnership. We are pleased to have our very own board member, Pamela Gabriel, Senior Vice President, Market Executive for Bank of America, joining us for a brief message this morning. Welcome, Pamela, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Betsy. It's wonderful to see you all this morning. And it was wonderful to see some of you last night at the Lead Chamber event. Well, thank you again for having us here. As Betsy mentioned, my name is Pamela Gabriel, and I am the San Diego Market Executive for Bank of America. In my particular role, I oversee all that we do for our community, our associates, and our clients, which definitely includes diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are so proud to support the Downtown San Diego Partnership in providing this Fed and Educated series, as this truly is one of the key pillars that we really lead by here at Bank of America. Our focus on diversity and inclusion is key to fostering a belonging, respectful, and fair treatment for every treatment at our company. I mean, our CEO is the chair, and committees are diversity and inclusion board, and that really steeps down to all of our leadership, and it truly is something that we live by day in and day out. We believe that our workforce must represent the communities that we serve so that we can achieve our strong operating results the right way, and it starts with our teammates and accepting them and allowing them to come and bring their whole selves to work every single day. We have a diverse network of employee resource groups throughout the company. They continue to grow all the way from lead to LGBTQ. So truly, it is something that we really encompass and embrace. I know that last year and throughout these difficult times in this pandemic, and through all of the racial issues that have been coming up, we've even encouraged courageous conversations. And so 165,000 of our employees have participated in more than 320 courageous conversations. So I'm truly looking forward to our conversation today, and I'm even looking forward to it even more because I get to introduce our wonderful moderator, Dr. Stephen Jones, who is the CEO of Jones. Mr. Jones is absolutely phenomenal, and I every time I talk with him, we have just the best time talking about different ideas and how we can definitely include diversity and inclusion into different ways into San Diego. So not only are you going to be hearing from a wonderful moderator and treat today, but look forward to the things that Dr. Jones will be doing in the community, because he will definitely be changing the way that we do diversity and inclusion here in San Diego. And I'm personally looking forward to it. A little bit about him, just in case you aren't familiar, but he is nationally known as one of America's top experts on diversity. His philosophy is to lead with listening to support clients in finding a strategy and solution that works for them. He is a dynamic keynote speaker, transformational facilitator, phenomenal, and I underline phenomenal, organizational effectiveness consultant, and innovative executive, have all been words that used to describe Dr. Stephen Jones, and I couldn't agree more. There are so many more accolades here that I would love to share with you, but I'm going to just get straight to it and pass it over to our wonderful moderator. And so, Dr. Stephen Jones, it is off to you.
Thank you, Pamela. It's great to see you. And we have a mutual admiration society we do, because I just am so impressed with all that you do for the community, your leadership at Bank of America, and your sponsorship that demonstrates that commitment as well for today. So thank you very, very much. Welcome, attendees. We're really excited that you are here. We have an action-packed conversation, a phenomenal panel, and we're looking forward to the hour just kind of flying by, I will say. As a matter of housekeeping for today's session, keep your eye on the chat box, because we'll be sharing lots of resources throughout the discussion today. We want to encourage you, if you have questions, to use the Q&A feature. I see we already have one question included as well so far, so thank you for that. And we're going to be trying to get to as many of the questions as we can throughout the discussion. The Downtown San Diego Partnership team will be putting together a recap of this webinar, and we'll be sending that out with the recording and links to the information as well. So let's get going. Betsy, also really appreciate your leadership and your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in your leadership at the Downtown San Diego Partnership as well. So, people use the words diversity, equity, and inclusion interchangeably. And we want to start off by kind of deciphering some of the differences there, because many people go, why should I think about these words? Why should they matter to me? And there's been a number of studies that show that companies that have a more diverse workforce outperform their competitors. In this one particular study by McKinsey, it showed that companies that were in the top quartile around ethnic and cultural diversity outperformed their competitors and the companies in the lower quartile by 36% in terms of profitability. I love the title of the article. It's called Diversity Wins. And that's really what we're talking about, right? I heard somebody kind of define diversity as counting heads, inclusion as making heads count. Right. I also heard someone say diversity is like being invited to the party. Inclusion is like being asked to dance, and equity is having an influence on the playlist that we're dancing to, right? And so when we think about diversity, we think about the people and the differences in any given setting, both demographic diversity and organizational diversity. When we think about inclusion, inclusion is about the idea of people feeling respected and valued for their skills, talents, contributions, and their backgrounds. And then equity is the process of fairness, right? And that people are feeling like the procedures, the reward, the policies, practices are fair. And that's part of what we mean by equity. So we are really, really excited to bring together this high-powered panel, I'm going to say it, yes, of leaders who will take a deeper dive into these concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I want to introduce our panelists. The first panelist that I want to introduce is Mei Lin Wolff. Mei Lin is the Executive Vice President and Chief People Officer for Webcor. Thank you for being on the panel, Mei Lin. Really appreciate you being here. Our second panelist is Fernando Lopez. Fernando is the Executive Director of San Diego Pride. Thank you, Fernando, for being a part of the panelists. We're looking forward to hear insights from both of you. And our third panelist is Lisette Islas. Lisette is Executive Vice President and Chief Impact Officer at MAAC, and also recently has taken on a new leadership role with the San Diego Regional Economic Development Corporation, where she's the Vice Chair of Inclusive Growth. Lisette, thank you for being a part of the panel, and we're really excited that you are here. So let's get going, panel. Each panelist is going to share insights and information for about 10 minutes, and then we'll move on to the next panelist, and then we'll have time for a discussion and Q&A. That's going to be our format for today. So we'll start off with Mei Lin, and Mei Lin will be talking about strategies and best practices for creating inclusive team cultures and leading inclusive teams. Mei Lin, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Jones. I'm really excited to be joining this important discussion today about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as Dr. Jones noted, I'm here to talk about creating and leading inclusive teams. So without further ado, so first of all, as Dr. Jones noted, the organizational benefits of diversity have been deeply studied and well documented. So I'm here to talk about how to truly harness the benefits of that diversity through developing inclusive culture. So why is that important? Well, diversity without inclusion will not deliver the full benefits, the full impact on business results. It can actually reduce productivity and creativity. And diversity without inclusion can lead to higher turnover rates. You might be able to get really great diverse talent in the door, that if they don't feel safe and respected and valued, they're not going to stay. So let's talk about how to really harness the benefits. We talk about diversity, and typically we talk about demographic diversity, which is really important, right? And demographic diversity is the diversity that we think about in terms of identities around gender, race, age, culture, sexual orientation, and others. But there are other elements of diversity that we want to consider as well on a team. On any given team, we're going to have diversity in terms of expertise, different levels, different types of skills based on education and based on experience. We'll have diversity in terms of location, typically geographic, and the differences and their impacts. And then finally, status, various organizational levels within an organization and how they're reflected in a team. And then the interplay or intersectionality of these different types of diversities within the team. So as I go into more around how to create inclusive culture, we want to be thinking about these different elements and how they can be valued and brought forward, and how people are going to be invited. So what does an inclusive team culture look like? Roles and responsibilities are clear. People feel valued for their unique skills, perspectives, and experiences. Employees feel safe to take risks. Mistakes are viewed as normal and considered learning opportunities. People proactively collaborate with one another. Each member feels respected and that their contributions are recognized by their team members. And because of all that, it's easier to discuss difficult problems and come up with solutions. And then there's transparency into how and why decisions are made. And because of all this, we can understand why organizations that really are able to create inclusive cultures are able to secure all the benefits that diversity can bring. So how do we do that? Well, at Webcor, we're a general contractor, and safety is our #1 priority. And we look at inclusion as being part of psychological safety, and it's imperative for our organization. So psychological safety was a term that was coined by Harvard Business School professor Amy Edmondson, and it relates to the belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. In other words, there's a truly inclusive culture. So there are 4 elements to psychological safety. And the first and the most important is inclusion safety. And that's where people are seen and valued. They feel that their experiences, their differences, their ideas matter. They feel safe to contribute. And it's okay not to know. Asking questions is expected. Collaboration safety is the safety in sharing information with one another. Cross-team, cross-functional interaction is encouraged. And the team is always asking themselves, who's missing from this conversation? Who's missing from this decision-making process? Learning safety is it's okay not to know, right? It's okay to experiment. It's encouraged. Their mistakes are part of learning. And finally, challenging safety. It's safe to speak up and expected to challenge the status quo, to look for new ways to solve problems and to voice those, regardless of the fact that you might be the only one with that particular perspective. So how do we do that? Leadership is critical. Whether we're talking about a holistic organizational inclusion or we're talking about team inclusion, the leader must be fully bought into the importance of creating that inclusive culture. And that buy-in needs to be reflected not merely in the words, but in the behaviors that are practiced, modeled, and how people are held accountable. That is the starting point, and that is the critical piece. And in order to secure that buy-in from leadership, we need to utilize all of those wonderful, rich studies and share that with our leaders so they understand the business impact that can be delivered through inclusion, so that they can communicate clear roles and responsibilities and expectations to their team, that they create the expectation on their team that people are to be respected for their individual experiences and perspectives. They promote learning culture through supporting risk-taking and being transparent about their own mistakes that they've made in order to show that it's normal and natural. They share information, they encourage collaboration, they themselves challenge the status quo, and they hold the team accountable and have ways for calling people in when they see behaviors that aren't inclusive. So where do we start? With all journeys, it's important to know where you're starting from. And that means introspection, which can be difficult. Looking at where are we today? Many organizations will utilize formal metrics to be able to do this. Surveys, focus groups, depending on the size of the team, the leader will need to determine which instrument is best used. And here's an opportunity for collaboration. Here's an opportunity to call people in, pull the team in together and talk about this as a team and ask themselves, what's the best way for us to figure out where we are today? Once you have the information, what are we going to do about it? Because it's not sufficient to ask the question. We need to be willing to take actions based on the results, whatever they may be. So how do we establish our vision? I highly recommend this as a collaborative and inclusive process. I think a lot of teams that form committees based on the survey results to analyze those results are most likely to have engagement on how they're going to improve their inclusion as a team. So forming that team committee, remembering all the elements of diversity, then setting some clear goals, and some very clear methods of measuring and celebrating progress. So it was really important to me today to be able to not only give you an overview about how to create inclusive teams and the roles of leadership on inclusive teams, but I wanted to be able to give some very specific ideas around what you can do today to bring back into your organization to begin this journey on creating an inclusive culture. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we do at Webcor. The first one is around team agreements. And team agreements are basically just as they sound. It's pulling together a team and together collaborating on what are the behaviors and what is the environment that's needed individually and as a group in order for people to feel included, safe, and engaged to do their best work. This process usually is a two-part process where you would communicate to your team the intention, schedule the first meeting, and ask people to come ready to provide their ideas. It's a good idea to provide also an anonymous method for people to put forth their ideas, depending on where you are in your journey in terms of team trust. But at that first meeting, the team will provide their ideas on how to create that inclusive culture. Common themes include honesty, respect, speaking up, what's talked about within the team stays within the team. But this will be very much dependent on the individuals within your team. So that's phase one. Phase two is another meeting. Once people have time to digest all the ideas that were shared, you come together and determine what was missing. And then vote as to whether or not everyone feels that the agreement reflects what's truly needed, and then talk about how you'll hold yourselves accountable. It should be noted anytime a new team member comes into the team, it's important to do a refresh to make sure that their perspectives are reflected in your team agreements. So that's one idea about how to create an inclusive culture. Another one is around how you do your team building. And I'm not talking about happy hours or lunches. I'm talking about creating opportunities for people to really get to know each other and establish new relationships. And the reason why I'm not talking about happy hours and lunches is that people tend to, in those unstructured social environments, gravitate towards the people they already know. But in order to really create an inclusive team culture, people need to feel comfortable with everyone within the team. So it's best to find some way to get people together working on something what I call a superordinate goal, something outside themselves. It could be as simple as a scavenger hunt, an escape room. It could be sharing about me or passion projects within your team meeting, something where your team members are getting to know each other on a personal level and finding new connections. The third element is, how do we elevate voices? How do we create opportunities to share their ideas and for people to take the lead? At Webcor, oftentimes teams will actually have the team themselves determine the agenda for meetings rather than the leader, to make sure that everyone feels that they're getting what they need out of the meeting. Many of our teams will rotate who's in charge of leading the meeting, giving opportunities to everyone, regardless of their level within the organization, to do that and to establish their ideas within those agenda items that the team has already established. Soliciting feedback from your employees is another great way to elevate voices, but you need to be sure that when you solicit the feedback, that you're willing to take action. So don't ask for feedback if people's voices aren't going to really be included in the decision or the result. And finally, culture of recognition. How do you create clear roles and responsibilities and then recognize people for their efforts? A really simple thing that was implemented by one of our teams was creating an item on their team agenda for shout outs. This team had original pulse survey scores that were low in team recognition, which impacts the inclusiveness of the team. And they saw a double-digit increase in recognition just by giving the opportunity for individual team members to recognize each other on a regular basis. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the basic elements on how to create an inclusive team and some ideas of things that you can take back within your organizations and use today.
Thank you, Mei Lin. I really appreciate the practicality and the levels of complexity that you presented in such a clear way. And I love the connection to inclusion connected to psychological safety and the way you then unpacked what that means and the four elements. Brilliantly done. So thank you very, very much, because that inclusion safety is also about the ability to bring our full selves to work, right? And to be our best and do our best. And our next panelist is going to talk about an area that is just really important regarding being able to bring and be my full self at work. So we're going to invite Fernando to tell us a little more about how to support gender identity and expression in the workplace. Fernando, take it away.
Thank you, Steve. And May, wow, that was great. I love doing this work. And you can really see how folks, this work is really intersectional. So thank you so much. Again, my name is Fernando Lopez. I use they, them, their pronouns. I'm the Executive Director of San Diego Pride. And I'm trying to get my presentation up here. Let's see, just one second. This is always fun. So I'm the Executive Director of San Diego Pride. And most folks might think of San Diego Pride as the parade, the party, the festival. But one of the things that we do is we're actually a year-round education and advocacy organization. What started, the first Pride events that started in 1970 here in San Diego, at the time it was actually legal to lobotomize gay men in the state of California. And that's a little jarring of a fact to think about, that it wasn't actually that long ago that it was legal to lobotomize people just because of their sexual orientation and gender identity here in the state of California. But that's the type of bravery and fighting that our community did just for visibility and space. Now, our organization in San Diego Pride has grown to have a $26.6 million economic impact. That's just one event on one weekend out of the year. So think about the economic impact of our community that it has all year round. So these are just some stats about our organization and the sort of work that we do. We're also we're the most philanthropic pride in the world, giving out more than $3 million to LGBT serving organizations around the world. And so we have over 40 year-round education and advocacy programs that serve intersectional communities within the LGBT community: women, youth, seniors, communities of color. And so just right off the bat, I know that we've got some great, strong allies here in the room and wonderful supporters of San Diego Pride who know that our community is, and our organization is, more than just a parade and a party once a year. But I wanted to start off sort of breaking and dispelling that myth for folks right off the bat, is there is a lot more going on in the LGBT community than meets the eye sometimes. So I also wanted to dispel some myths about the LGBT community. So often, I think people think our rights and privileges and protections were already won. We know that we won marriage equality back in 2013 here in California, and across the United States, we won marriage equality back in 2015. But when you think in the United States, homosexuality was still criminalized until 2003. And for LGBTQ employers, 52% of LGBTQ employees until last year, they could be fired from their jobs just because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. And that was a Title VII case that had to do with gender equity, and where the Supreme Court recognized that treatment of LGBTQ people, the discrimination there was based on a disparity of interpretation of gender roles. And that's why it fell under Title VII. So
That's
there
good.
are about 9 million people, LGBT, living in the United States. 88% of them are employed, but 1.3 million live here in California, and 16% of folks are raising families.
Fernando, let, let me
Oh,
pause you just for 1 second. I think your video, if you could swap the screen, I think
oh,
we're not seeing you in presentation mode.
oh no, what are you seeing?
We're seeing
Me?
your notes as well.
Oh,
Um, so I wanted to support you, and,
oh, thank you.
you got it. Because I love what you're saying, and I want to make sure folks are focused on hearing your message.
Oh, let me see. Sorry, I am not the Zoom expert.
That's okay.
Let's see, let me try this again.
Present mode.
Present mode. Zoom. Share screen. You know what? I'm not, let's see, I'm going to try this again. What's being shown now?
We're not, there we go. Okay, you're good.
Now it's good?
Continue to flow, absolutely.
Oh, right. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much.
You are very welcome.
Transgender people experience unemployment at 3 times the rate of the general population. And just even this year, the Williams Institute, if you're not familiar, the Williams Institute is an incredible think tank out of UCLA. They have a ton of data. I think they're going to share the links with you that show that LGBTQ folks are still experiencing unfair treatment by their employers. And 46% feel that they're going to be or experiencing unfair treatment in the workplace. So again, I think a lot of folks look at the LGBT community, they think our victories are already won. There's also another myth about the LGBT community that we're double income and no kids. And they sort of picture 2 white men who have some affluenza to them because, you know, of that double income, no kids sort of mythology around the LGBT community. But the fact is that LGBTQ folks are discriminated against from the time that they're born. And really the world around us has been created for cisgender heterosexual folks. And so for LGBTQ people, the discrimination that we face begins in elementary school, oftentimes by the faculties in our school, by our own friends, our institutions of faith, and oftentimes in our own families. So those sorts of bullying and interpersonal issues lead to lower rates of school attendance, poor outcomes in education, mental health, substance abuse, self-medication, and rates of homelessness. So 40% of all homeless youth are LGBT identified. And we know that LGBTQ people are not 40% of the population. And so all of those things that have micro-social impacts, interpersonal bullying, discrimination, those lead to macro social impacts, right? And macroeconomic impacts in the long term. Now let's see, is it still showing the right screen or did it move?
You're good.
All right. So then similar to, similar to what Mei was saying about the psychological impacts as well, you know, we're talking about LGBTQ people feeling like they can bring their full selves to the world. And what we know from the data and the research is that even our allies, even heterosexual folks, they're more likely to stay at a place of employment if you're supporting your LGBTQ employees. LGBTQ folks have about a $3.7 trillion market impact. And so the more that your company, as an employer, as a vendor is supporting the LGBT community, the more likely you are to retain that business. Now, a lot of these core principles are the same, right? From what we just heard about. Stay accountable. What are you doing to actively ensure an affirming workplace for LGBTQ folks? Are you just putting a rainbow sticker up? Are you just sending one happy Pride message once a year? Are you actually looking at the policies that you have, the practices that you have, the facilities that you have, the advertising that you create, your dress code policies. Are you really looking holistically at your organization in the way that those things might impact the LGBT community, your employees, and the people that you serve? There's some additional resources that they'll send you the link, which is the Hrc Quality Index. And it's a way for you to really look at your internal and external policies and make sure that what they're experiencing meets your values. So it's kind of a checklist for you, and whether or not you actually go through Hrc and fill out their survey, I think it's a really healthy tool to start creating some of those benchmarks that we already heard about. And of course, our executive leadership must set the tone. We always know that. I can't tell you how many times we get invited in to do DE&I work, and we're there with the entire staff, everyone from the frontline folks answering the phones to the CEO, and it turns out that the person at the very top is the one creating the issues. Some other basics are things like, don't assume that all of your coworkers are straight and cisgender. Try to include those gender neutral words in your meetings. Hi, everyone, instead of ladies and gentlemen. Things like that can really go a long way. And also keep learning, right? This is always a moving target. The LGBTQ movement isn't done. We still aren't fully equal in the United States. There's a whole bunch of laws, policies, that a patchwork of rights and protections when you move from state to state, and even from city to city and county to county. So keep learning what policies and procedures that you need to change in order to be more inclusive. And those benchmarks can really be helpful. Stay curious and invest in the training. So again, I can't tell you how many times the LGBT community gets cut out of diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So it's really wonderful to be invited here today by Downtown Partnership, to know that we're a part of that. It's excellent to hear the other partners and panelists talking about the LGBT community, but so often we get cut out. So make sure that you are directly investing in the LGBT community when doing this work. Those sorts of training opportunities are available. We do that as an organization here at San Diego Pride. The center, the LGBT Community Center, also does those trainings. So make sure you're going to the source and investing in that training. And remember, it's not just LGBTQ folks that need allies. If you're even looking at the SOGI data, it was so wonderful to see the crosstabs earlier on May's data, where you could see, I don't know if you looked that closely, you could see LGBTQ women and LGBTQ men, and there was a distinct disparity between those. And it's important to remember that that intersectional disparity is real across issues of gender, race, ethnicity, and geography. Sexual orientation and gender identity doesn't exist in a binary. And while we don't have time to go into the full work of this, I just wanted to be able to show you this slide and say that we have increasingly so people who identify as two-spirit, agender, or non-binary folks. So in Southern California, about 30% of all people under the age of 27 identify as non-binary. The Tony Atkins Gender Inclusive Act means that your companies, your businesses are required to recognize and serve people who are non-binary and live somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. So make sure that as you're evaluating your processes and your policies, that you're taking into consideration non-binary people in the state of California, because it's actually a legal requirement now. Making sure to be respectful of folks' pronouns as well. Some really easy things there that you can do. Again, I'm a non-binary person. I use they, them, their pronouns. I just wanted to briefly give you a glimpse into some of that. And now I'm going to exit presentation mode. I hope. There's a lot of there. I just wanted to give you a brief overview. I know we're going to go into some Q&A. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fernando. That was really powerful. And I appreciate you naming the psychological fear that still exists out there for the LGBTQ community and allies, right? And the some practical steps to take to help reduce that fear through the steps that you took, the index, Hrc index, and then also some of the great tools and tactics. And to your point, kind of looking across generations, we also see a shift, would you say, in the interactions and expectations of inclusion, of both the LGBTQ community and I think diversity as a whole?
Absolutely. I think whatever sort of movement we're looking at, LGBTQ folks have been a part of the suffrage movement. They were part of the civil rights movement, right? Bayard Rustin, who helped plan the March on Washington with Martin Luther King, was an openly gay man who was then pushed to the side and out of the limelight. And so it's really wonderful to see all aspects of feminism, racial justice, and the LGBTQ civil rights movement become more and more cohesive and intersectional over time. Absolutely.
Very good, very good. So we're going to invite Lisette to talk with us more about the multi-generational workforce and to continue our learning and connections big time. So Lisette.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Jones, and thank you to my fellow panelists. It's been wonderful hearing. I've been learning, and I was sincerely excited to be part of the panel just to honestly hear you speak and have an opportunity to interact with you. So my name is Lisette Islas, she, her, hers. I am the Executive Vice President at MAAC. And let me tell you a little bit about my organization. I will share some basic information about my organization and then share with you about my work at the EDC. Let's get this started. All right. So MAAC is an organization that has been around since 1965. Our workforce is 575 people spread across 36 locations in San Diego County. We are a very large nonprofit organization. In fact, we're very large even by for-profit standards. And as Dr. Jones said, part of the DEI work and the learning work that I'm going to share about with you here that occurs here at MAAC is related to the fact that we have a multi-generational workforce. In fact, 30% of our workforce has been at MAAC for 25 years or more, which I love to share because I think it says a lot about their commitment to our mission and our work. And I hope it says something about our organization as a place to work and how we treat our employees. So one of the things I want to point out, because people often don't know what MAAC does. So at our core, we are an anti-poverty organization. We work in the areas of economic development, education, health and well-being, housing, advocacy, and leadership development. But all of those add up to being issues that interface with people's lives when they are economically unstable. So day after day, our team focuses on strengthening the lives of individuals, families, and communities. Now, I will say that often people say like, oh, okay, well, you know, nonprofits, it's kind of a different category. But in fact, we are a business, much like those that all of you on the other side of the screen operate. We have HR issues and dilemmas to deal with. We look at our productivity. All of the same issues that you're thinking through are issues that we think through every day. The only difference is that the products that we produce are different. They are services that we provide to the community. And so just to share a little bit more about us, we have a $60 million operating budget. And as I said, it says 565 employees across the agency. I think we are at about 575, which is what I shared earlier. And so I want to talk to you. So I want to talk to you a little bit more. I understand that I'm having trouble sharing the screen. Is that Dr. Jones? Are we?
No, we can see the screen.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. All right, so want to talk a little bit more then about what we do with regard to our DEI work, because I like to think that with DEI work is almost like being in shape. You never fully arrive, right? So you could be at your peak in one instant, but if you maybe stop going to the gym, maybe get a little unfocused, then you have to go back, get back in gear and do it again. So DEI work is something that we're constantly having to pay attention to as organizations. And what I would say is that I would say that I've not come across an organization that is perfect. There are different levels on the spectrum that people work at, and certainly it's something that perfection is something that we strive for, but certainly work is ongoing. And so MAAC invests a lot in the development of our team. And you can see here that our senior leadership team received 110 hours of training last year, and our managers, our mid-level managers, received 80, which is more than the national average, significantly more, in fact. And that's because we believe that if we have strong teams internally, then we can deliver better products to the community. So, excuse me, there's been a large amount of noise in the background just in the last couple of minutes. So the MAAC really focuses on the trainings and many of the things that Mei Lin talked about, including psychological safety, coaching, etc., are things that we do for our leadership teams. Now, all that being said, some of our numbers look great and others not so much. I am really proud of the ethnic diversity of our teams. You could see here our board of directors and our senior leadership team strongly represent the communities that we serve. Now, in terms of gender diversity, our numbers, along our team, when given the chance to do something basic like choosing their pronouns and applying pronouns to signature lines, they came and told me, Lisette, I don't feel comfortable doing this without significant training so that all of our staff, our multi-generational staff, can really understand where I'm coming from. So really although we had done the work in terms of psychological safety, those basic DEI trainings about what it means, what all of the different terminology means, even not just related to gender, but even ethnicity and all the ways that you can slice diversity, there was work to be done. And so we are doing an overhaul in our organization right now to assure that our team really feels comfortable, has the latest language. And again, it is something that we are working on constantly. So now shifting to my work at the EDC. Why does a nonprofit serve, or why would I serve as the vice chair focused on inclusive growth with the EDC? Well, as I shared earlier, MAAC's work is about economic development. And so the inclusive growth work that the EDC has been on is absolutely in line with the work that I do every day and our aspirations to grow the strength of the region. So traditionally, as many of you know, economic development organizations such as the regional EDC have been involved in, as my friend Nakia would say, involved in expanding the pie, but not necessarily focused on how the pie should be distributed. And so back in 2017, the EDC participated in a learning lab with the Brookings Institution, really looking to answer the question about whether there was a role for economic development organizations in inclusion. And so they conducted a 6-month research project in which they then looked at data across the board about San Diego. And what they discovered was that, our inclusive data did not look so hot. In fact, one of the numbers that was most shocking to me is that 1 million people in San Diego cannot afford to live here. And what that means is for a family of 4 that owns their home, it's about a $96,000 a year income. And for folks who rent a home, it's $61,000. Now, why the difference? It's because it's based on the cost of living. And as we all know, in San Diego, the cost of purchasing a home is very expensive. Now, $96,000 or $61,000 is not subsistence living. It is having enough to pay your bills, and then perhaps a few extra dollars to take your children to the zoo or maybe a movie. And I think that's something fair to say that all of us would want to be able to do and think is reasonable. So when we look at that number, 1 million people cannot afford to live in San Diego. That means that about less than 43% of us can afford to live in San Diego. And so when we think about inclusion, if you look at the number, 85% of Latinos do not hold a bachelor degree in San Diego. Then that's something that we need to tackle because education rates are absolutely linked to income. And why pay attention to small businesses? Well, in San Diego, 60% of San Diegans are employed by small businesses. That means that's about double the national average. So the EDC, working together with its partners, developed goals. We set goals and said by 2030, we want to reach these numbers. And first and foremost, I'm going to start from the right because that's the biggest number, the million households. Well, what we hope is to have 75,000 more thriving households by 2030. Why 75,000? Well, that's the number that would put us above half of San Diegans being able to afford living here. So moving us from 43% to 50. Which I think you and I, everyone on screen would agree is probably not as high as we would want it. Now, when it comes to talent and skilled and jobs, again, we want to focus on those small businesses, supporting them so that they can pay $42,000 a year salary plus benefits, and then really increasing the number of students that graduate with degrees and certificates. In fact, we're looking to double that, the number that we have today. And if we would just be able to get Black and Brown children to achieve academically at the same or at equitable rates, the talent goal would be met. And so you could see that there's an ongoing theme here about inclusion. So these numbers are a few years old. And so we're looking to update them. In fact, they're being updated as we speak. But there's a couple of things that we've been looking at to trace how folks did during the pandemic that are also indicators that the numbers are probably looking worse today than they did back in 2017 when we originally started looking at this. And so you could see from this chart that folks at the bottom level of our incomes have not been able to rebound as quickly or as equitably as folks at the other income categories. So very quickly, why am I talking to you about all of this? Well, often when we talk about DEI work in the workplace, people think like, well, that's something that the CEO has to take care of, or that's something that HR is going to focus on. And actually, the truth of it is that while the CEO can set the direction for the work and HR can inform us, perhaps our learning team can support it, the true change happens in the day-to-day decisions that are made by people at all levels of the organization. So who you hire, who you give contracts to, what you set salary levels at, all of those impact that inclusive growth work that the EDC is focused on. 75,000 people is not going to be reached by the EDC alone. The EDC can put out information, but it's up to all of us as we're making decisions in our day-to-day work, no matter where you sit in the organization. You have a role in helping to reach that goal and assuring that we truly have an inclusive region, because when the region becomes more inclusive, in fact, what we've been able to see and show is that the strength of the economy grows for all of us.
I love the way when we think about what's the outcome, what are we solving for, what's the goal, I think you have just laid out the benefit, right, to San Diego as a region. When people feel psychologically safe, right, when they feel that inclusion, when they feel that they can be all of who they are, and when we look at what's the impact on our economics and people's living situations, very, very nicely connected. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask all the panelists to come back on. We're going to do about 4 minutes of deep conversation. So, right, it's just so much that you all have shared. and it's been really, really rich. I think that a question I would ask for us is, what is one of the key challenges or obstacles that you all are seeing in your practice, that is just, for those people who are going, this sounds great. What do you see as one of those challenges, and kind of one countermeasure, if you will? Who wants to start us off?
I will start. I think that during the pandemic, all of us got so focused on the survival of our businesses,
Yes.
that the very important DEI work kind of took second stage, right? And that is not the work that we could afford to put on the back burner. That's the work that really needs to be front and center every day. And so there's an intentionality there. And we looked across the room at each other a couple of months ago and said, my goodness, we need to pick this back up. It is not something that we can afford to let go of, even temporarily.
Yes, very good. Mei Lin, I saw your head nodding, and then we'll come to you, Fernando.
I would say that, within an organization, it's failure to link diversity, equity, and inclusion to the business strategy, and creating a structure for it to have a long-term impact, right? I think a lot of organizations over the last year and a half were in reaction mode, and you really won't have a program that has legs. And I love what Lisette said, that you're never done, right? This is work that needs to be ongoing. So I think that the only way to really ensure that happens is to put a formalized structure in place and tie it to your business strategy.
Excellent, thank you for that long-term sustainable change, right, Mei Lin? Excellent. Fernando, you talked about these obstacles and challenges happen at work, happen at home, with families, in so many different places. What's one of those obstacles you see?
Well, so co-sign everything Mei and Lisette said. And I think for the LGBT community, so often folks think that they put a rainbow flag up during Pride and then they're done. And that's literally the investment that they have. Oh no, we support the LGBT community. We put a rainbow flag in like 1 week out of the year. Great. Like, I don't care if you come to Pride, and I run Pride. Like, but what it really comes down to is ensuring that SOGI data, sexual orientation and gender identity data, are part of the benchmarks and metrics that you're using to assess your own DE&I work. If you're forgetting that, then you're forgetting us.
Yeah, very good. Well said. That accountability part, really the metrics that go along with the accountability to track progress, right? And Lisette, you mentioned earlier that the psychological safety was there, but the skills were not there to be able to have the conversation, the question. One of the questions we got in the chat box was, and I'll pitch this to you, Fernando, how do you ask someone respectfully what their pronouns are? You mentioned pronouns in your presentation.
So I answered in the chat. It really has to do with, I think sometimes virtue signaling like that, putting a rainbow flag out is not the best, but sometimes it can be a helpful first step. Yeah. So talking about the LGBT community positively, sharing your own personal pronouns. Like, you look at Dr. Jones and Mei and my Zoom screens, and you see our pronouns are there. So you're proactively sharing your pronouns. It signals to someone that it is in your mind, so you feel comfortable doing that, and that will help other folks share theirs.
Very good, very good. I see that regarding time, we have to put a comma in our conversation to pause it, not to stop it. The conversations will continue. And let me say, right next to the conversations, and Lisette, you said this, the skill development has to continue, right? And so to support the conversation. And so we're going to continue talking and learning and growing, and we want to encourage all of you to do the same. It's been an honor to moderate this powerful panel and be a partner. I'm going to pitch it to you, Betsy, to close this out.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much to our sponsor, Bank of America, for having this session. And a big thank you to Dr. Jones and to Mei Lin and Fernando and Lisette for joining us today to share their experiences and insight. I actually was writing down a whole bunch of things and even texting with a couple of my team members during this because we took a lot from it and we want to continue these conversations. Thank you very much for taking all of this time. If you're interested in additional opportunities to hear and learn about from regional experts like this wonderful panel today, we encourage you to sign up for our email list to receive information on the next Fed and Educated series. We also invite you to consider membership with the Downtown Partnership if these kinds of conversations would help your business or organization move forward. We will be making a recording of this webinar available tomorrow in our follow-up email to participants. In closing, just thank you for all of your inspiration today, and to everybody that is on our Zoom today, stay safe, stay strong, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a great day.